Welcome in. This is David O'Gray. Happy to be here. I'm glad you're here. Just got back in today from, you guys know, you've been following me. I've been in the States for the last 2 weeks at the Catholic University of America, working on my doctoral program there. So we have to do a 2 week residency every summer. So happy to be there. You ever been somewhere though, and usually people will be like, man, time went fast. Time flew past. It went by fast. It didn't. No, it's like I felt every single day of those 2 weeks. It was just long. Probably because at some point in time it got really hot in DC. And in the dormitory I was staying in, the AC wasn't doing what it was supposed to be doing. So, but yeah, but it was a good time there. Did a lot of fun things. Got to see my daughters, of course. So I made a vlog about it. So go check that out if you're interested. Made a vlog about my 2 weeks there at the Catholic University of America and what I'm working on as far as my doctoral studies and why I chose the Catholic University of America. But the prodigal son, one of our followers here watches the videos. He came over into the vlog and was like, hey, David, did you see this video with Tim Gordon, Tim Pool, Jay Dyer, where looks like Tim Gordon and Aiden Mattis and Jay Dyer, they were debating about whether Catholicism is a superior religion. And somehow towards the end, Tim Gordon starts talking about Freemasonry, and then it launches into this whole big debate about Freemasonry. And so I went over there and checked it out. And man, I just laughed my butt off. And so I had to come over here, do a stream about it. It's like I said, we're getting back to funny. I think there's enough Catholics on YouTube always trying to make you angry, always have grievances, always angry about something and trying to make you mad about something. So we're getting back to funny here. That's what we're doing. And so Tuesday, we're going to have a new Mass Nightmares. Catholic Mass Nightmares is returning after 3 years. We're going to reboot the Catholic Mass Nightmares on Tuesday. So make sure you tune in for that. But yeah, we're getting back to funny over here, man. Also look forward to some new Father Hell No's coming out soon. But yeah, this thing with Jay Dyer and Tim Pool was hilarious. Let's get into it now. This is David O'Gray. I never even heard of these people, and so I'm glad Prodigal Son brought it up to me because this definitely would not have showed up on my YouTube algorithm. And so this is Tim Pool. I guess it's his channel, so it's his show, and he brought on a person named Jay Dyer, who I believe is an Orthodox Christian, and Aiden Mattis, who I believe is an Anglican, and he brought on Timothy Gordon. Tim, we know Tim. I don't follow Tim, but we know Tim. We like Tim, right? Remember, this is our favorite clip of Tim.
Theocosis, for us laymen. Explain that.
Yeah, Tim is always the smartest guy in the room. So we like Tim. We talked about Tim a few times, and his appearances the Jason Whitlock show, which was always horrendous. But let's get into this. And the reason why I thought it was interesting, because this is what I've been talking about for like 15 years. 15 years I've been trying to encourage and evangelize and teach Catholics how to evangelize Freemasons, how to bring Freemasons, especially those who call themselves Catholic, out of Freemasonry. I've been trying, and it got to a point, right, where talking wasn't enough, articles weren't enough. So I had to write the definitive book on the subject. This is the Catholic Catechism on Freemasonry. It's like a 300-page plus book. But if you don't like reading, you have a short attention span. I also have a compendium to it. It's the compendium of the Catholic Catechism on Freemasonry. So these are the definitive books on Freemasonry, why the Catholic Church has been opposed to it for over 300 years. You guys know I was a prominent Freemason for well over a decade. Um, there have been, I don't think, anyone who's more advanced and accomplished and um, in Freemasonry who converted to Catholicism and began to do the work of leading Catholics out of Freemasonry than me. Um, so that's the work I've been engaged in, and it's always been frustrating because no matter no matter how much you try to teach Catholics how to speak to Freemasons, it seems like they always want to go back into the things that don't work, right? So here's my 3 tips, and then we're going to get into the video. I'm going to show you how horrendous this Dyer did. So number one thing when you're speaking to a Freemason, the first thing you want to do is you want to just keep it general. Keep it general. The reason why you keep it general about why they should leave Freemasonry, or how where the Catholic Church is opposed to Freemasonry, why it's opposed, is number one, not all Freemasons experience the same degrees in the same way. Every jurisdiction of Freemasonry, of which there are thousands, they have different little things about their rituals, even in the first 3 degrees, that are different from the jurisdiction right next door. So not every Freemason experiences the Masonic rituals the same way. Not every Freemason shares the same degrees. Yes, to be a Freemason, you have to have the first 3 degrees. But then you had these people like you'll see here, Dyer. He wants to start talking about these other degrees. Well, most Freemasons don't go past the 3rd degree because that is the highest degree, what's properly called Freemasonry. Anything other than that is just, some Freemasons call it higher degrees, some call it additional light, some call it other types of different matriculation. Right. The third thing you want to do when you keep it general is you want to avoid the conspiracies and the myths and weak sources of authority. All right, and you'll see Dyer does that. So he fails on number one when I think he had a real opportunity here with Aiden to maybe plant some seeds in him to get him to leave Freemasonry, but he fails. The second thing you want to do is you want to speak to Freemasons in their language. And as Catholics, we oftentimes experience this, where people say, "Oh, you guys pray to Mary," or "You guys call priest your father," or you don't believe in salvation," and things like this. And the things that I think where Protestants really mess up with this is that they don't speak to us in our terms because they tend to be lazy and they don't take the time to understand Catholicism from Catholicism. They want to understand Catholicism from anti-Catholicism. So you have to understand things from a person's perspective. Any psychologist, therapist does this when they're speaking to their clients. They want them to tell their story and they speak to them through their story. Again, you want to speak to people on their terms, so you want to understand their terms, not an anti perspective of Freemasonry or any religion. You're trying to evangelize a Mormon. Go read the Book of Mormon or go read Theology by a Mormon to really understand where they're coming from. The third thing that you want to do, here's the 3 rules. First rule, again, keep it general. Second rule, speak to them in their language, understand their lexicon. And third, you want to evangelize, not tell lies. Right? You don't want to speak at people. You want to enter into a dialogue and a conversation. And again, here, Dyer screws up again here with Aiden Mattis. He's just speaking at him. He's cutting him off. He's yelling at him, and he's just treating him like he's a child, and that's where he fails. So what you want to do, you really want to be really open up dialogue, ask questions, ask open-ended questions, right? You want to say something like, you can't speak the name Jesus in the lodge, but you're a Christian. Tell me how does it make you feel? Or where do you find a conflict here between making these punishments of these obligations of these grievous punishments and then saying, "So help me God and keep me steadfast"? What God do you think they're referring to in this obligation that you took? Do you think it was Jesus? And then, talk about, well, yeah, that doesn't really sound right? Or you say something, because Jesus is a God of life. He promotes life. Well, why would you promise yourself death? or a promise that you'll get the death penalty if you break a Masonic oath. Does that really sound like an oath you should be taking to God? Like, who is that God that you're praying to or making an obligation to? Or you say something like, yeah, Freemasonry, I understand that they promise more light and that it has, greater lights and lesser lights. But Jesus Christ says that he's the light of the world. Can you tell me more about that conflict there? Do you see a conflict? This is how you want to evangelize, like enter into a dialogue and ask open-ended questions and get into their story. Maybe ask them, yeah, why did you become a Freemason? Tell me that story. So oftentimes you're going to enter into some brokenness there. Like they were missing something that made them go into Freemasonry. So this is how you this is how you do the work. And again, you also want to understand Freemasonry. So that's how you do it. And so if you aren't really prepared to do the work, don't do the work. Just pray for them. So let's get into this video. I think it's funny. I think it's hilarious. But it's also, I think, really a teachable moment. So again, that's Tim. Timothy Gordon. He is a Catholic, and also you're gonna see in this video, you're gonna see Tim Pool. He's the host, but mainly who you're gonna see Dyer. Again, he's an Orthodox Christian. He has the hat on, and then the guy that he's in dialogue with is someone named by Aiden Mattis. Aiden actually has. I'm surprised Aiden never popped up into my algorithm. He actually makes videos that the type of videos I watch on YouTube about history and myths and legends and stuff like that. So there we go. Check it out.
Of Christian religions. And the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was written assuming that all 13 would. And what the Establishment Clause means literally was that Congress and Congress alone shall not make a law respecting a disestablishment of religion. Congress wasn't allowed to disestablish the state legislature established sects of Christianity. That's literally what it means. And it was a Masonic U.S. Supreme Court in 1947 in a case called Everson versus Board of Ed that literally reversed the meaning and incorporated the First Amendment.
Speaking of which, like Enlightenment Freemasonic values, how do you reconcile Freemasonry with Christianity?
All right, so Tim was trying to make a point. Tim likes talking about law and all this stuff, and how it intersects with the where we're at in the culture now. And he kind of points to Freemasonry, or he would say when he says a Masonic court, he means that there were some Supreme Court justices who were Freemasons on the court. So he calls it a Masonic court. And so he likes to use that as a way to explain why the United States is like it is now. He likes to point to, Freemasonry is a problem. And that also, it tends to be one of those, what I call the scapegoat conspiracy narrative, the scapegoat conspiracy myths, as they're called. You kind of want to point to like one thing and say, because of that one thing, that's the reason why everything is like it is. All right. So it tends to be weak, but that's the argument he was making. And then Dyer then jumps in and says, hey, knowing that Aiden here is a Freemason, he said, hey, he wants to pick a fight here. And he picks a fight that he's about to lose, which is the worst type of fight you want to pick.
What about Freemasonry is in conflict with Christianity?
How about Albert Pike's teachings?
Albert Pike is not recognized as influential by most Masons.
Which is true. Albert Pike, he gets a lot of attention because he wrote that book, his magnum opus, Morals and Dogma. And he also played a very prominent role, if not the role, in crafting many of the degrees of the Scottish Rite for the Southern jurisdiction. All right. And granted, the Southern jurisdiction of the United States, they did export their formula of the 33 degrees are most used throughout the rest of the world. Like the rest of the Scottish Rite was founded in North Carolina or South Carolina by, I think they called them 13 gentlemen or whatever. And as at some point in time, other countries say, hey, we want those degrees. So they imported their system to their places, where Australia, New Zealand, places in Africa, Europe, whatever. And And so, yeah, the Southern jurisdictions, their rituals or their narratives in those 33 degrees do come from Opera Pike. But also, you had a northern jurisdiction in the United States, which has more members than the South, much more influential, a lot more money, whose degrees are different. And even today, it's been the case for probably the last 30 years. The southern jurisdiction of the ancient accepted Scottish Rite has reworked all those degrees. They recrafted them. They kind of took what Pike did and they rewrote it. So it's even hard to say now, oh, Albert Pike, the southern jurisdiction, those are his degrees. Not anymore. They reworked them all. And so, which means they rewrote them and kind of took a lot of Pike's weird stuff out of them. But Jay Dyer, he wants to bring up Albert Pike here as some sort of, I think he's looking at Freemasonry as a lot of Catholics or sometimes Christians do. They look at Freemasonry as if Freemasonry has some sort of source of authority as a person. They don't. There's no source of authority in Freemasonry. The highest source of authority in Freemasonry is the Grand Master of whatever Grand Lodge. The Grand Master can say whatever he wants to say, and that's the law. That's the source of authority. But we tend to look at Freemasonry as if though, it's like a Supreme Court. We could point to a person and say, no, that person is the source of authority. That as the Freemasons quote Albert Pike. Freemasons don't quote Albert Pike. He's not even relevant. And that's what Jay Dyer, that's what Aiden's going to try to tell Jay Dyer with not much effect.
Okay,
so his teachings are non-essential.
You're telling me the morals and dogma.
I am a Freemason, yeah.
Morals and dogma.
I'll admit I've had my questions because I have run into things.
You're telling me morals and dogma.
Now stop right there. If you're trying to evangelize, not tell a lies, that's where you stop the conversation right there. Like, oh, you've had some questions about Freemasonry. Like, tell me more about that. That's the conversation right there. But Jay Dyer, he just wants to speak about what he wants to speak. He cannot read the room. He's one of those people who can't read the room. He can't listen. He just has a mouth and no ears, no eyes. So it's really unfortunate because this could have been an opportunity for a breakthrough with Aiden here about this subject, because he just admitted, I've had some problems.
Dogma is not used in Scottish Rite.
No, it is used in the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite and the southern.
So it's not influential. So
Rite.
He has a giant statue in DC, but he's not influential.
Which is the worst argument I've ever heard in my entire life. The argument Jay is saying because a person has a statue, they're somehow influential or over the organization. No, Albert Pike has had I think the Black Lives Matter tore it down. I don't know if it's still up there in DC, but at least he used to have a statue in DC, because DC is in the South, and he was a Confederate war hero, and he had other accomplishments besides that. But he's very prominent in the Confederate Army. So that's at this point in time, you just kind of realize, oh, Jay Dyer he's not really smart. He's kind of dumb, right? That's like that when a light bulb goes off, like, oh, this guy's an idiot.
He was influential for a number of other reasons. Secularly, he was a Civil War general. He was a accomplished ethnographer.
Okay, what about Manly P. Hall? He also doesn't count?
Manly P. Hall admitted that he wrote everything that you have a problem with before he became a Freemason.
What Masons do count?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about with Freemasonry. Freemasonry is the first 3 degrees. That's it.
Or the philosophy.
What is it?
Not true. There's 32nd, 33rd degree.
Again, he's not listening. Aiden said Freemasonry consists of 3 degrees, which is true. Freemasonry. Now you have other rites: Scottish Rite, York Rite, Shrine, Eastern Star, Allied Masonic degrees, the Rite of Memphis. You have so many different systems and rites. When I was a Freemason, I had over 50 degrees. There's so many degrees you can go out there and get. But and so, but again, here's just like more proof and evidence that Jay Dyer doesn't. He wants to explain something he doesn't understand, which is, I mean, just a sign of just low intellect.
There are in the Scottish Rite, which is appellate to Freemasonry. It's like getting a merit badge.
Yeah, but I don't care about what your terms are for these different sects. When
These
they
are.
I don't care what your terms are for these different sects. I just want to tell you what. I just want to explain to you how my opinions are the truth, regardless of whatever facts you have. Aiden, your facts don't matter. My opinion does.
These aren't my terms.
They have a naturalistic bent and ethos. For example, Pike says that.
Pike.
Again, he goes back to Pike. When Aiden just explained to him that Pike is not some sort of source of authority. Pike isn't like, Freemasons don't have like a Paul or some sort of scripture or something like they point to. They don't have any fathers of their religion. And Freemasonry is a religion, by the way. You know, it has its own sacraments and systems by which a man becomes a better man. It's a religion, it has its own God and everything. But it doesn't have any fathers of their faith. But that's how Jay Dyer wants to, even though Aiden just explained to him, Pike doesn't mean anything. Well, according to Pike, right? He just wants to go back to his same talking points, which shows that even in real time, he's not able to intellectually grow.
Is irrelevant to me.
No, he's not. Well, he's irrelevant to you, but not to the history of Freemasonry.
No, Pike is irrelevant to everything outside
the history
of the
of Freemasonry.
Pike is irrelevant
to the history of Freemasonry generally.
Who's the Freemason here?
Pike done nothing in regards to what is properly Freemasonry, the first 2 degrees. All of Pike's work concerned the Scottish Rite and in one jurisdiction of it in which he wrote the degrees. And so now Aiden says, like, who's the source of authority here? Like, I have the experience, I have the empirical knowledge. And then Jay Dyer responds,
who's the one who knows what he's talking about? It's
That's
me.
an appeal to authority.
No, it's not.
He calls that an appeal to authority, right? And I think there is some merit and some value to people's experience and their knowledge based upon their experience. And that's not when a person appeals to their own experience and their own knowledge. They're not using themselves as a source of authority. They're just, this is empirical knowledge. This is my experience. I'm telling you my story. My story isn't appealing to any source of authority. So that was an error in trying to point out a logical fallacy.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I'm citing your sources.
Trying to. You're citing my
yourself.
sources.
Albert Pike is a source
Albert,
Freemasonry, not you, dude.
No, Albert Pike.
In Freemasonry, Aiden's opinion has as much value as Albert Pike's.
Is a source for the southern jurisdiction.
You're telling me that he's not famous in the world of Freemasonry. Okay, Giuseppe Mazzini. How about Giuseppe Mazzini? Does he count?
Is he P2?
No, he's in the Grand Orient Lodge.
Grand Orient, not regular.
So what counts?
The 3 degrees of the craft lodges, mainly split between England and the United States.
So the York Rite, is that what?
The York Rite, like the Scottish Rite, is appellate and is not held in union with all Freemasonic ideals.
So, and the British Empire, what was the function of Freemasonry in the British Empire, in your view?
It was a social club.
Is it?
He's completely wrong there. He calls it a social club. And that's kind of what Cardinal Neri tried to tell his uncle, Pope Clement XII, before Pope Clement XII, bedridden, was about to write the papal bull against Freemasonry. He went to tell, he told his uncle, don't worry about Freemasonry in England. It's just an innocent mirth. Guys just enjoying themselves, drinking a little bit, right? And then that's more of the myth of Freemasonry that we as Catholics push back against. That it's a religion, and it's religion that's incompatible with Catholicism.
All right, so are you a speculative Mason?
All Masons are speculative Masons.
No, they're not. The original.
So Aiden says all Freemasons are speculative, right? Which is true. But then again, Jay Dyer's like, your facts are not more important than my opinion. And so he's gonna confuse terms here, right? He's gonna point to stonemasons, who call themselves, generally in some places in Europe, they would call themselves free stonemasons. They went by different names, but that's distinct from the organization of Freemasonry. And so they're talking about two different here, and I think they're both correct in a sense. But I think the onus was on Jay Dyer here to understand what his opponent was saying. Again, speak in his language and his terms. But I really don't think he's smart enough to understand that there was a distinction between.
Original Masons were they were stone workers. They weren't speculative Freemasons.
Yes, it did originate from operative Masons in the late 1300s as a Catholic organization, which very explicitly held that you must love the church with God and the church with all your heart.
That's not speculative Freemasonry.
All right.
It was the origin of speculative Freemasonry.
No, it's not.
Gentlemen.
Yes, the Regius poem. The Regius poem. The
Catholic Church has condemned you for centuries.
7 times.
Why?
7 different times.
For centuries.
Why?
Centuries.
Why? Tell me why. I know why. Do you? Do you know why?
I do know why. Because
do you know why the Pope in 1738?
And in here, Aiden doesn't know what he's talking about here. He's talking about 1738, and he's going to refer to a document wrote by Leo XIII, Humana Genus, when he should have been referring to enmity. So so his facts are off too, right? But he may have, it may be in his head. Sometimes we confuse papal documents, especially if you're not a Catholic. So, but yeah, he's off here as well.
Shut up! I've read the papal document.
You've been interrupting me while asking me
because your answers are stupid.
Okay, you're not stupid. You don't know what you're talking about.
They're dishonest.
No, do you know why?
Guys,
it was because they met in secret. It was
because you're acting as if
1738 in Humanum
Humanum Janus.
Yeah, in that one.
No, it's not Humana Genus. It's enmity.
What was the reason he
Make
gave?
sure to watch Timcast IRL tonight at 8 p.m. Guys, we're over time.
Okay.
And if we had more time, I'd say let's get into Masonry.
Dude, I'm happy to come back and do Masonry.
Let's do another one on the Freemasonry.
Even just from the historical perspective.
I think
he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well, okay. I think.
But you're lying because
Okay,
Albert Pike is very influential.
Albert Pike is not influential outside of the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite.
And he still wants to talk about Albert Pike. That's like, I guess that's the only thing he has in his wheelhouse. Like Albert Pike, I guess that's his main talking point. If he can't rely on Albert Pike, then he's like a fish out of water. But yeah, I thought that was funny because again, I think that's a perfect example of what I've been speaking about for the last 15 years. And why typically it's very hard to bring a person out of Freemasonry, whether they're Catholic or not. I think as Catholics, we do have an advantage because we have a source of authority to point to. Like the church teaches dogmatically that you cannot be a Freemason. You choose hell or heaven. Like we have that. It's a dogma. You cannot be a Catholic and a Freemason. But even with that, it's very difficult to get people to leave Freemasonry. It is. It's easier to get someone to end up a porn addiction, a heroin addiction, a sex addiction, than to get them to leave Freemasonry. Drugs and physical pleasures, they appeal to certain senses of the body and of the mind, but Freemasonry appeals to something much more deeper. It appeals to the intellect, and appeals to the social condition a person may be experiencing, just their atmosphere. It appeals to emotions and symptoms of emotions such as low self-esteem, ego, and those are the most difficult things. And so Freemasonry becomes part of the psychological narrative, right? It sits in a deeper place in the mind, the body, and the soul, including friendships and all this stuff, than chemical addictions and other physical addictions may have. So this is very hard to get a person to leave Freemasonry. Most Freemasons will never leave Freemasonry. That's just the fact. It takes an act of God So that's why you have to pray first for these people who are in Freemasonry, rather than try to tell-lies them. That definitely doesn't work. They instantly put up the defense mechanism, right, to protect all the the psychosis, well, not psychosis, the psychology of what it means to be a human person that Freemasonry has entrenched themselves into. So it takes deep psychoanalysis really to really pinpoint why this person is clinging to Freemasonry. Um so but yeah that was Jay Dyer is like the perfect example of what you do not do. So and someone asked me, hey, you should like debate Aiden. I'm like, no, I don't. I wouldn't do that at all. That's something I'd be interested in. I like to hear more of what he has to say. Probably, I'll probably enter into a dialogue with him. We could do that. I definitely wouldn't debate him. That's. I don't even think Catholics should debate Protestants. You know what that is? That's indifferentism. When you openly in public debate Protestants or people of other religions, people who are watching, what they're saying is like, oh, both of these things are true. I can pick and choose. Like that's indifferentism. I think we weaken our position as Catholics when we enter in situations where we're competing with a lie. Just because the audience, if you have an audience, if it's like a one-on-one debate, fine. But if there's an audience, that's dangerous and could lead people into sin. So no, I wouldn't debate Aiden for a number of reasons, obviously. For the same reason I don't debate Catholics, Protestants or anything like that. So, but and secondly, I don't have a reason why a substantial reason why a Protestant would leave. And Aiden's an Anglican, so he's a Protestant essentially. And he admits in the video that his church holds a different opinion than him. So he doesn't believe in authority anyway. But I do believe that I do think there is a way. So even though I don't think you cannot point to scripture or anything to bring a Freemason out of there, because as a Protestant, they can just interpret scripture how they want to and say, oh, it really doesn't say that. Well, what about oaths? It says don't make oaths. Unless your yes means yes and your no means no. What about that? What about you can't have two gods, God and mammon? What about that? What about that? And they'll say, oh, they'll explain it, right? They'll find a way. So Protestants, they can do that with scripture. They can do that magic, right? But I do believe that I think it is possible for a person who is a sincere Christian, meaning that they truly want to follow Jesus. They really want to be on a narrow way. They're not Catholic or Orthodox. They're just, just a Bible believing Christian. I think a sincere Christian would not be involved with Freemasonry for the same reason they wouldn't belong to anything that even sniffs like it may lead them off the narrow way, because they're sincere in following just Jesus. For them, Jesus is enough. But also, I believe that a sincere Christian inevitably becomes Catholic, because becoming Catholic is on a narrow way. So, and at this time, I don't think Aiden is sincere about being a Christian from what I see right here. So he's not even close to being someone I'd be interested in speaking with in that regard. Right now, I think he just needs prayer. But I would like to hear his story, more about his story. So, but yeah, anyway, that's today's show. Thanks, John. John says you are the #1 expert on Freemasons. I appreciate that, my man. I appreciate that. Thanks for recognizing the hard work. But I'll be back on Tuesday for the return of the Mass Nightmares. But until then, until next time, blessings and shalom to you and to yours. This is David.